Let's start by checking last night's homework. Check your answers to geometry proofs. So, last night we gave you a sheet where you were proving triangles congruent, but a lot of the blanks were filled in for you. Tonight we're giving you an assignment where none of the blanks are filled in for you. So we're going to talk about how you're going to approach that in a minute. Okay, so today we are going to prove two triangles congruent, and none of the proof is going to be filled in. So you might want to write this down in your notes, or you can just follow along. We talked about yesterday, you always start with the given. You always start with a given, and you see if anything can follow from the given. So let's start with the given. TR and QS bisect each other. So that's given. I'm going to cross it off because I've used it. And you literally just write it down word for word. You just write down the given. Next, you see, okay, what follows from that statement? What does it mean if a segment has been bisected? Well, if a segment's been bisected, then I have two congruent segments. So you add markings to your picture, but when you add a marking, you have to document it. Good, 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 good. Segment TP is congruent to segment PR. What's the reason? The reason is definition of segment bisector. Well, those segments were bisecting each other, so we have more information. We know that SQ was also bisected, so now we know SP is congruent to PQ, also definition of segment bisector. Then you say to yourself, if I were trying to see if these were congruent, what would I do next? Well, good. I would add vertical angle markings. Angle 1, when you add something to your picture, you have to document it. When you add something to your picture, you have to write it down. Angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. Why? Good. Vertical angles are congruent. Vertical angles are congruent. Lastly, the last step. There's no guessing here. Every time, the last step is the proof. Triangle QPR is congruent to triangle SPT. And what's the reason? Very good. Y'all have it. Side, angle, side. End of proof. Eric, you're actually up first. What's our first statement and reason? Eric, what's our first statement and reason? Good. And reason? Good. Relina, what's number 2? What happens when two segments are parallel, lines are parallel? Relina, what's number 2? Yeah, so if these lines are parallel, then you need to make the letter Z. And if you make the letter Z, you see that these angles are congruent. So you need to write it down that they're congruent. Angle 3 is congruent to angle 4. And what's the reason? If parallel, then alternate interior angles are congruent. So that's the follow-up from number 1. Okay, Tahir, but that's not the way we're going to do it. We're going to do the given and then what happens. And then we'll use another given and what happens with that one. Okay? Next one. BC is congruent to AD. That's what Relina said. Thank you. That one's given. Johan, what comes after that? Okay, so now we're saying on number 3, I wrote the wrong symbol, it is parallel. On number 3, we're saying that BC is parallel to AD. BC is parallel to AD. You have to follow the logic. If those two segments are parallel, what do you get to mark? What happens? What comes after that? Well, if those are parallel, the conclusion is angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. That's the conclusion to those being parallel. Angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. And what's the reason? It's the same reason as last time. If parallel, then alternate interior angles are congruent. Now we can do yours, Johan. Now, okay, I'll come back to that, Johan. Now we can do yours. Segment AC is congruent to segment AC. We never use the common segment theorem because I didn't even really go over that with y'all in class. We used to teach it, now we don't. Just cross that one out. You will never use the common segment theorem. What is number 5? Good. Reflexive property. It's number 1 on your paper. Okay, now Johan said, why couldn't we just do side, side, side and be done with it? Well, guys, sides being parallel is not the same as sides being congruent. AB is not congruent to CD. This is parallel, parallel. It is not congruent. So these are not guilty by side, side, side. Okay, number 6, Araceli. Do you know number 6? So Araceli said that our triangles are congruent. Triangle ABC is congruent to triangle CDA by angle, side, angle. Very good. Quan, what comes last? So now, the last step is always the proof. Every time, all the time, that is the last step. Angle B is congruent to angle D. How do we know that B is congruent to D? By CPCTC. End of proof. Okay? So as you're doing your homework, you can go to my homework help on the website, and I worked 2 of the proofs for you under proofs number 2. It says coming soon, but I'll go put it on there right now.